Asa, I wanted to turn to you finally. People have been asking about what is going on in the UK, and the connection between these, these racist mobs around the streets, and what they have to do with Palestine and the genocide in
Yeah,
Gaza.
well, what is ever going on in the UK? I mean, it's increasingly start to look like a failed state. The reality is, the sad thing that's happening in the UK simply is that there is anti-Muslim race riots happening. That's what's happening, and the background to it and the primary cause to it really is just years and decades of successive governments and successive mainstream media scapegoating and demonizing Muslims in particular and immigrants in general in this country. And in a way, these riots that we've seen draw on a tradition of British fascism, although it's not really, doesn't seem to be quite as, the far right isn't as organized as it has been in other times in history, but this is kind of a new phenomenon and seems to be happening. But I mean, I think as well, it's important to say that these things don't come in a vacuum, right? That there is, it seems to me, or I'm increasingly getting a feeling there is a connection to the demonization of the Palestine solidarity protests that have happened because we're seeing very different policing, right? The right wing press at the moment is accusing the police of they're sort of supporting these riots that have been happening. Certain right wing press figures have been doing that and sort of saying, "Well, you didn't crack down on the Palestine, that the what the previous government was calling the Palestine solidarity protests hate marches, which was
Right.
completely ridiculous. And what we're seeing now is actual riots and violence targeting primarily Muslims and immigrants in general. But also, there is an Israel connection. So, first of all, there's this story that I was just seeing in Middle East Monitor, not Middle East Monitor, Middle East Eye, which I think tomorrow has got for us. An Israeli politician and settler, Aria King, who's a settler from Britain, whose parents settled in occupied Jerusalem from Britain, and he has been, as it says, been accused of stoking the race riots in the UK. And we can scroll down to his tweet, I think, where he is putting out this sort of typical Islamophobia, where he's saying the police are helping Muslims to take over Britain. And this is the kind of racism that it's kind of Israelification of Britain in some ways. And let's not forget one of the main and most prominent agitators for these anti-immigrant riots, violence, has been, of course, Tommy Robinson. The so-called Tommy Robinson, isn't this is him here? It's not his real name. His real name is apparently Stephen Yaxley Lennon, but he changed it. Apparently, from what I heard, he changed his name to Tommy Robinson because it sounds more English, right? This is a photo of him from 2016 in occupied southwestern Syria, i.e., the Golan Heights, posing with Israeli occupation troops in occupied Syria. And this is he's a leading faction of the British far right, which has for many years a fact that pro-Israel groups, pro-Israel lobby groups that are very close to the state of Israel itself, have been pumping cash and funding into this pro-Israel and pro-Zionist faction of the British far right, which is really the only salient part of the British far right these days. It is pro-Israel, pro-Zionist, and that is the reality of it. We don't have time to get into all of that, obviously. I've done some reporting on it in the past. There's also quite a good tweet thread that if you go to my Twitter, at Asa Winstanley, by Low Key, which has got some good research there. You can also look up Tommy Robinson on the Electronic Intifada's website, electronicintifada.net. You can see some of our past reporting on it there, notably during the last major Israeli war against the Gaza Strip, population of the Gaza Strip in 2021. Tommy Robinson joined the official pro-Israel demonstration, which was fairly small but used quite a lot of violent and racist rhetoric in London. And he was, despite the leaders of the march putting on a show of distancing themselves from him, he was welcomed on the ground by the protesters there. So there's this quite long running history between Tommy Robinson in particular and the British Zionist movement.